Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, the rest of our morning is a very open time. A time to have a conversation, a time to consider questions that might be on your mind. And, you know, we have great resources here. We have Amina, who is a Quranic scholar with awareness of gender and social justice issues. We have Imam Feisal, who is an incredible resource, especially his approach to Islam as an Imam and at the same time as a Sufi. And Abdul, who has great wealth of experience in Sufi literature and the practicalities of service and the haqq of everyday life, and Camille with her beauties.
Assalamu alaikum. We were talking a lot about love and everything. I want to really, the reason I came over here was like, I thought that I have come to the point that I cannot do love with love. Like, you know, there are so much negative things in the world that looks like that I don't have any more love to give. How can I go on?
Yes. So you've heard this question. Would anybody here like to begin to address it? Abdul Hayy?
Salam. So I like to tell the Afghans that I work with, who I always think of them as sort of like armadillos, because they protect their bellies really well with armor. As many people do, especially men in this culture of ours. And when I was a young man, I was an armadillo until I couldn't stand it anymore. An armadillo is a wonderful animal that they turn into purses and things at the Mexican border and sell to you on the beach, you know? There are these animals with a hard back, have an armored back, and then they have soft underneath, you see. Like a turtle? Like a turtle, except a turtle might also be hard underneath, you see. But it'd be like, or like maybe like a porcupine, depending what kind of reaction you have. But I entered a desert of nihilism. I had a wonderful upbringing, and I was not abused or anything. Nevertheless, I entered a sea of despair, and I became hopeless and suicidal. So I like to tell the Afghans, sometimes they say, our ustad has made you Janishin. What credentials do you have? I said, my credentials is that I was hopeless. Because until a person willingly or unwillingly gives up the things they have been taught about goodness and seeming to be good and following all of the rules, and till the person goes into the furnace, as our Sheikh Camille has told us. The impurities of imitation will not leave us, and so this means we also have to enter that world experientially. And God, Most High, He says, وَلَا نَبْلُونَكُمْ حَتَّى نَعْلَمَ الْمُجَاهِدِينَ مِنْكُمْ وَالصَّابِرِينَ, or something like this, hopefully. In other words, we will test you until we know which of you are striving and which are patient? And Sheikh Ibn al-Arabi says this is a most astonishing and beautiful statement, because the one who already knows everything says, I will gain knowledge. And he says, therefore, this is a knowledge of dhawq, of direct tasting. And you will taste and I will taste absolute devastation, hopelessness, darkness. And my experience is also from the point of view of being a Westerner, and fortunately, growing up at a time when psychology had taken a more experiential turn, and where I learned that by surrendering, see, isn't it interesting? The most successful psychotherapy is psychotherapy of surrender. Surrender to the devastation, surrender to the hopelessness, to the pain, but in the arms of the friend. And in psychotherapy, that friend might be the psychotherapist who's helping one to not be afraid to go into devastation, because this is the nature of the dark night of the soul. This is a purification, and one doesn't need to be terrified of letting go there, because ultimately the only thing we will find eventually is the mercy. But we may have to suffer and let go in great grief, sadness. For me it was years of this. And without that sadness and without that hopelessness, I never would have found the truth. So all I can say to you is be patient and content with the state that God has given you, but surrender to it rather than become embittered by it. Or there's a difference between armoring oneself from such feelings. This is a much worse situation of people being dry, having no feeling, faking it through life. It's much better to be hopeless and desperate, because at least it's authentic, an authentic recognition of the fundamental lack and weakness, despair of the human being. Their position is one of neediness, indigence. We're fundamentally indigent. And when we go deeply into that state and accept it and feel it to the core, this is what becomes our credentials to receive the blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you.
Baba, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I know that Abdul Hayy grew up in Tahiti and on a schooner sailing between San Francisco and Tahiti, and must have had an extraordinary childhood and early life. And I'm really compelled to ask, what was your despair about, if I may ask? I'd like to hear what you suffered, and maybe others could benefit from this.
Well, initially I wasn't sure, frankly, and in fact I was just as upset about having no reason to be upset, because I knew many people who had been beaten and molested and all kinds of things that I found incredible, frankly. I found utterly incredible that a parent would do any such thing to their own child. But I was perplexed about my own situation. And it's something, the details that I don't often go into, but I'm not unwilling to answer such a question because it's very interesting. the process of, it raises the issue of what is psychotherapy, what is relief, how does this happen in any language that we decide to use. But I honestly found that the only answers I found were through surrendering to the suffering and going more deeply into it. And at the farthest limit, I found out that my sadness was that I had become an exile, and I was abandoned. And when I went more and more deeply, I realized just the very coming into this world was the ultimate source of my sadness. And I realized this. I was not a Muslim. I was not particularly religious at this time in my life. I was not doing this in with any particular guidance. I did believe in God and I did turn to God, but in a very different way. I had abandoned the Christianity that I had been raised in, although I was nominally still Christian, but I really wasn't. So there was something fundamental where I initially was perplexed, and then I realized that my sadness was inexplicable, but I would keep going into it, encouraged by people who knew this approach. For me, that meant people, they're working in Gestalt therapy and more experiential forms of psychotherapy. And as I went into the sadness, the first benefit that I derived from this was to escape from depression and to escape from panic. Both of those are forces that try to contain the awareness of sadness or the awareness of something, you see. So they're like defensive measures. So the first benefit is to move from the position of extreme incongruent reactions to the actual suffering. And then from there, moving into the suffering more deeply, there was the discovery of loneliness and abandonment. And finally, I realized that a lot of it was about moving from paradise to America. Moving from Tahiti, where I was a child, where everything was perfect. So you see, there's a step that I'll explore a tiny bit. I saw my brother have a complete kind of psychotic break, and that was inconceivable because I also came from a perfect family. So therefore it's inconceivable that somebody from this perfect family would have this breakdown. It was inexplicable. And at one point, when he came at me with a knife in a delusion, I couldn't even stop him except just to say his name. And then he came to enough to not follow through with whatever he had in mind. This left me in great pain that I had fallen from paradise, you see. But then when I went more deeply, I realized that was all just symbolic of coming into this world. Leaving paradise from Tahiti, coming here, is only symbolic of leaving Alas and coming into this world and facing embodiment, the world of the senses, the hallucinations and delusions that arise from living in this world, the attachments, the indoctrination, the faking it and copying and imitating that leads to a real death of the soul, And finally, realizing the only mercy left is the suffering that would wash all of that away. So the suffering, we have to be willing to embrace it.
Thank you.
I don't want to go into my own personal life, but I also went through some dark moments and difficult moments. And I feel that it's also a way of, as Brother Hayy said, Allah says, we shall test you. And we shall, another verse says, we shall test you with a little bit of loss of your life, loss of your, the fruits of your labor, until we know which one of you are truthful. And I believe also that it's a part of the spiritual journey is to detach from attachments which are not part of our essential self, a timeless self. We have many layers of self. We have our professional self, our emotional self, our families, our whatever. But the reality of La ilaha illallah and the reality of the core self, which is divine breath, that is the permanent part, and every other part dies or goes through some. We need to detach from it at some level, otherwise it creates great pain. I'm not saying this jovially, but I'm going to say something which may make some of you laugh. I think it might help you if you sing Gloria Gaynor's song, I Will Survive. I don't know if you've seen her film or not. There's a film about her life, which I found very, very moving, in which she describes her story and the immense suffering they went through. But there is a line in that song which says, I have no more love to give. And when you said that, it reminded me of that song. I think you should just let your hair down and just blast the song on and just, sing along with her. I think it might help you. It's a great song, too.
Well, just a comment that this is the core issue of this entire weekend, living with the truth. And, as all of the panelists have been commenting throughout the weekend, everything is temporary. Everything is going to end except the face of God, except the truth. And so for us to be able to live with the truth of that, on the one side, just as you said, we need to come to grips with that sense of loss. We need to find some way to survive. I will survive. In the midst of this terrible sense of loss that we feel. And, and there's times in our lives when everything is great, and there's times in our lives when we have great loss. And it comes and goes. But as this conference, this retreat, is teaching us, the truth is that God, the beautiful side of that, living with the truth, is that God is real. I don't believe in God. I don't. I know God exists. It's not a belief. It's a knowledge. It's an absolute knowledge. I don't believe that the grass is green. I know, I can see that it's green. I don't believe you're sitting in front of me. I know you're sitting in front of me. And I do not believe in God. I know. There's no question. It's so far beyond the level of belief. It's an absolute knowledge. And that's the truth that we live with. Living with the truth. That's the beauty. Thank you.
Ameen.
That's an excellent commentary on Surah Al-Asr. Wal-Asr innal insana lafi khusr. Indeed, mankind is in a state of loss. Illa alladhina amanu, except those who have faith. وعملوا الصالحات and وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. And however you want the commentary on tawasaw, with truth and with patience. So haqq and sabr are an important part of it. And patience not only means, sabr does not only mean patience, also means perseverance. Thank you, that was beautiful.
Bismillah. what came was to mention that in times where I've also felt like I didn't have anything left to give, it's because I was operating from a very limited scope of what I am. And just to humbly say that that might be the most opportune time to break that vessel of limitation and die to that part of you that feels like it has nothing left to give, and allow the channel of the infinite to truly flow through you, and recognize that as your true identity, and that part of you never runs out.
Thank you for saying that. I've had that experience in my life over the past couple years when I've felt like I've just been challenged for reasons that seemed like were so unfair. At great moments when I felt I deserved to be lifted up, such as days after my marriage and my husband's ex-wife launched this terrible malicious lawsuit against us to extort money, or days after the day before my ordination ceremony, I was plummeted from family strife, and I had physical things happening, and so I teach this dance class, and I do healing work on people, and there's a lot of times when I wake up in the morning and go to my class, and I felt so tattered. I feel like, how can I possibly go and not only coalesce physical energy and dance and move, but it's a very holistic practice, and we bring in a lot of energy movement and spiritual teaching. That's where the juice is for me. And I feel like sometimes I've been crying before my class, and I say to my husband, like, I'm supposed to go inspire these people, and I feel so uninspired myself. And there's a grace of God that comes through, and it's like the suffering has caused me in times that I have to get out of my way, and that container, that limitation is broken. I'm broken. I'm so broken sometimes. And I go and I show up, and something happens. And there's energy that, it's like I can tap into this deep resource, and it moves through me. And it's like I'm being moved. And that transforms me. That transforms me. Usually, for my whole day, if unless I go into my mind and I pick up my brokenness again if I walk out the door. But yeah, there's that place where the vessel is broken and I'm just drowning in the ocean, but there's a buoyancy. I don't know how to explain it necessarily, but I have had that experience, and it feels like the grace of God moves me.
Thank you.
There's a Sufi saying, die before you die, which I'm sure many of you have heard. And this is not just a rhetorical statement. And I believe that what you are going through, in a certain sense, is that death before death, which is, I think, an important part of our journey. And the message here, which has been reiterated, is relish this and then surrender to what else is coming. A rebirth of something even greater happens. And inshallah, it will happen for you too.
Over the past few hours, this tale keeps coming through, so I share that. Before that, just a little quip, perhaps. There was this man who was praying every day for great wealth and had a specific amount in mind, let's say $100,000. And he said, "Oh, Allah, please, $100,000 would go so far. I could fix my house, I can buy this, I can, all this." And he's praying every day, "Please, $100,000, please." Allah acquiesces and gives him his wish, and he receives, through whatever means, $100,000. And he goes to Allah and says, thank you so much for hearing my prayer, for answering with your beneficence and giving me this $100,000. And Allah says, you're quite welcome, my son, but I had so much more for you. That's one. But the story that kept jumping through when I would hear various of your expositions of Al-Haq is the story of Ayaz, the slave. There are a lot of stories of Ayaz, the slave, but this one where Ayaz, menial, as a slave, serving the king, faithfully serving the king, day after day and month after month. And the king, being the king, has a broad overview, and he sees everything. So he noticed Ayaz among all these other slaves, and so he promoted him, and he gave him more responsibility, until in this course of advancement, he made him be the deputy or be in charge of the king's treasury. And so Ayaz would go daily to the treasury room where all of the jewels and the gold and all of the ornaments were kept. But you know how it is in dunya, in the world, there's jealousy and competitiveness, etc. And so the other slaves, or even the ministers perhaps, noticed that Ayaz would go into the treasury room every day. What was he doing? What was he up to? I bet he was pilfering. I bet he was taking just a little tiny emerald or a little tiny sapphire, just tucking it in his pocket, right? So they went and told the king. That's the scorpion under the throne. They went and told the king, Ayaz is stealing from you right from under your nose. He said, that's impossible. I know Ayaz. He would not do that. He said, oh no, we've seen him. He goes every day, every day. The king says, well, I don't believe it, but just to be safe or sure, we're going to drill a little hole through the wall so that we can peek inside. So the king, the next time that Ayaz was going through, he said, he's going in, he's going in. The king went and he peeped through that little hole. Sure enough, there was Ayaz in the treasury room. And he would go into the box, this little box that was there, and he would open it up. And he would take out these old, dirty, tattered clothes, and he would put them on. And then he would pray, and he would say, Ayaz, never forget the generosity and the graciousness and the mercy of the king who has raised you from nothing. Never forget the grace, right? And also, in a way, remember where you've been lifted from. So some of your expositions over these past couple of days reminded me of that. The haqq is, you can't describe it. You can't describe it. If sometimes I hear my own voice and it's grating, you know what I mean? It's like going across a grater. When I hear my voice saying, La ilaha illallah, but I hear it's my voice. I hear my voice saying it, and it hurts sometimes. That it's still there, and I have to go and put on those clothes and remember. And I have just this moment of opportunity to remember, inshallah. And my gratitude to each of you who brought such a beautiful light from your own experience, that's the haqq, is your experience that has made you, inshallah, that has made you the vessels to be able to share with authenticity. With authenticity. I heard every word from each of you, and they didn't ring false. Praise God. Thank you very much for a beautiful weekend.
Thank you, Tasneem. I know that story well, and it was a pleasure to hear it from your lips.
people ask me about my name, especially, traveling all parts of the world, the Muslim world. And I said, well, I had the pleasure of being able to choose my name. My father was a Methodist minister, and he gave all of us 8 children biblical names. And I was named Mary, from the mother of Isa, alayhi salam, Jesus. And so when I became Muslim, I wanted to transfer that same relationship to the Prophet Muhammad. So I took the name Amina. But I took the name Wadud because I was raised with the God of love. And my father was my first spiritual teacher, and it was on his lap that I had my first experience of transcendence. And I was really small, not even reading yet. And I used to be afraid of the thunderstorm because I believed that God was telling me what I was doing wrong. Every time the thunder would go, I thought it was an answer to my prayers about my little meager life. And during a storm one night, my father took me in his lap. I think I must be inspired by Camille to share this story. He took me in his lap and he told me the biblical story about the rainbow and God's promise that he would never again destroy the world by water. And I was comforted beyond the room into the heavens. And I remember that in all of the struggles and disappointments, because that embodiment of the idea of God's presence and God's love was what I was raised with, and yet I chose to, or was chosen, is what I like to say, I was chosen to become Muslim. So I wanted always to recall the significance of the God of love. So I chose Wadud because of that. And having done so, and also having named all my 5 children with Islamic names, because I was inspired to do similarly, I realized that it becomes the pivotal point of both challenge and grace, that living in the presence of God's infinite love is always going to occur with the possibility simultaneously of living in the absence. And I spent a lot of time actually contemplating what it means, what it feels like to be in the absence. And every moment of it is an excruciating acknowledgement of the separation between self and Allah. And as such is a profound calling into the deepest region of self to return to the love of Allah. So I never experience Wadud as a static state. It is always in intense rotation between my capacity, or the mirror of my heart's capacity to be able to either shine through the love and presence of Allah, or to shine and yearn for that presence in the absence. And I spent years, actually, almost every forum I would come forward and I would talk about that absence, because ultimately it was the place where I was most likely to hear the still small voice. But I had to stop listening to my own yearning in order to be able to recognize that it's still there, that it's always there. So I embraced the presence in God's absence, and I'm always inspired. Sometimes I'm even thinking I need to change my name to make my life a little easier. But I'm always inspired by the love, but not because of its simplicity, but rather because of its awesomeness.
For all my life, I really haven't got into the daily habit of doing the 5 times a day salat in a continuous way. And I'm really trying to break the cycle, trying to do the salat 5 times a day, and with the fasting becoming the summertime fast also. And last year I fasted, and I felt like a train wreck in terms of just not being able to stand that much, going that long without food and working. And so on one side, I look how challenging these are for me and how I think I'm not able to do it, and I question my iman. And then especially when I look at people who in Saudi Arabia during the summertime with all that work, physical work they're doing, they're still able to go and fast. And I just makes me feel like I'm so weak and so maybe unfaithful or don't have a strong iman at all that I can't even do this in an environment comfortable like the US. So how should I be able to look at this? I mean, the fact that I'm not waking up. Here I woke up, this was the first time in a while I woke up this early to pray, and it felt so good and so nice, and I felt like I was going to take a nap. I didn't have to, but honestly, I'm just afraid when I go back, I might slide back into my own world of coming up with excuses. Or I know Islam is supposed to be easy on you, and if you're sick or not able to fast, you shouldn't fast, but how do I determine if I fall into that category or not, just because it's hard for me?
I'm not going to answer this. I'm going to hope somebody else can answer your question, but I'm just going to rephrase it and say that real spiritual transformation and the spiritual work has something to do with a struggle that goes on inside ourselves. And I think we would all acknowledge that we have the same struggle that you have. Maybe with different things, maybe with the same things. And I too am interested in what my friends might have to say about this struggle. Maybe you can illuminate me a little bit.
Your phrasing as jihad is a very key insight, because in one of the very final battles that the Prophet waged, at the end of the battle he was telling his companions who were leaving the lesser jihad, going to the greater jihad. I'm sure you all are familiar with this story, and whereupon the companions were really disturbed about it because they were wondering what battle they were going to next. And he said it's the jihad the nafs, the jihad of the self. And this is the jihad which all of us are waging in various degrees. The inner battle, which is waged at many levels. The level that you waged, the level that the sister waged, you with your dance classes and opening up to, is all part of the jihad. Even what you are facing is part of jihad in nafs. We learn from others. I mean, I discovered, for example, that having a very good sahur is very helpful. Is why we have sahur, a light meal before dawn. I have, what Egyptians call ful medammis, which are fava beans. It is very helpful because it maintains your sugar level. If you have boiled eggs, forget it. You'll be starving in 2 hours. And you'll have a major sugar dip, and you'll get dizzy and stuff like that. So having a sahur, having the right kind of food, are among the tips that I find very helpful to people. When people do that, they are able to sustain themselves during their workday and able to manage. Regarding the difficulty of prayers, very often I tell new Muslims, don't try to do all the 5 prayers at a time. Try and be regular with what you can comfortably. Can you pray twice a day, for example? All right, then at least pray regularly before you even try to worry about doing it at the right time. Pray, let's say, and do jama. do jam' and do qasr even. It's more important to do the prayers and to develop the discipline to do the prayers. So do the fajr, even if after you wake up, just do it and gain the discipline of doing it. Do dhuhr and asr together at some convenient time. Do maghrib and isha together. And just do the fard even. So, and then allow the discipline to take into you. Don't try to do everything at one time. The Prophet said, if you try to beat religion, religion will beat you. If you try to think you can do everything perfectly, you cannot. You will lose that battle. Also, in the summertime, Maghrib is very long. In Saudi Arabia, even though it may be the summer, the day is not as long as here in the summertime. So maybe you break your fast at 6 o'clock in the evening, or take a time which is similar to that time of Mecca or Medina. You find out what time they have their Fajr and what time they have their Maghrib, and follow that timing here. That's another interpretation which can be considered. At least you are following something, so you're performing the fast in that way, and break your fast at the time that they break their fast, even though it's before sunset here. It's not so bad here, but a friend of mine went to Alaska and it's really difficult over there. The day is really long, the night is really short. He just feels he doesn't fast in the winter time. It's no flavor to fasting. So these interpretations have been put forth by Muslim scholars as being a valid way, because the key thing of all these ibadat, of acts of worship, is not the mechanics of the worship. It's the spiritual thing that you gain from it. The Prophet said in the hadith, many a person fasts and gains nothing from his fast but hunger and thirst. And many a person prays and gets nothing from his prayer but fatigue. So you don't want to be one of those. Okay, so no matter how little you fast and how little you pray, if your prayer and your fasting gives you the spiritual benefits of it, and you have to learn to be able to test and to taste that your acts of worship are not purely, kind of treadmill type of, you're just running on a treadmill and not getting anywhere spiritually. You feel, no matter how little it is, that you are actually having spiritual traction. That is what is important. Allah says in the Quran that He has decreed fast upon you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you gain in taqwa. So you have to gain in taqwa from your acts of worship. If you don't gain taqwa from fasting, then your fasting is useless. So that's the key thing. Keep your eyes on the prize, as we like to say in America. And the prize is greater taqwa, greater spiritual attainment. And if you focus on that, you will attain it, inshaAllah. And focus on the other teachings also. Read the Quran a little bit in Ramadan. Be in this suhbah, which teaches you of many things. And the jihad of the nafs will always be there. It never stops. It continues. But it's part of the journey of getting increasingly mature and developed in your spirituality, in your taqwa. But it's a journey which never ends, as Brother Kabir said. And inshaAllah, you will be a shining example of that taqwa.
It's very beautiful. Imam Feisal says, with the authority of a lot of study and consideration, and recipes might differ. I recommend 3-egg omelet with half an avocado, half a tomato, some cheese, 3 pieces of wheat toast, 2 large cups of coffee, and then continue drinking water up until the time of stopping. And then all of this, for me, I get up early, so that part's not a problem. But if you have to wait, it's all right, because I used to be in the same boat. Later, I live close enough to my house during the lunch hour at school. I drive home and I take a minimum of a half an hour nap. And then I wake up and I'm fine. I go back to, I'm working the whole time, inshallah. Regarding the prayers, I think the wisdom of what Imam Feisal is very, very wonderful. We have a friend who's not here this time, Judith Jensen, and she, we were sitting long ago, 25 years ago, in an assembly, and a Peruvian friend who didn't know I had already become Muslim. He was saying, "Oh, I want so much to be a Muslim, but I just know I couldn't do all of it." I said, "Gabriel, that's what a terrible excuse for not becoming a Muslim. That you can't say you could say one prayer a day." And he said, and he became annoyed with me, and he said, "Oh, Bob, it's so easy for you to say because you don't understand that I wish to become a Muslim." And Judith starts laughing out loud, see, and he says, "Why are you laughing?" He says, "Because don't you know that for the last year that Bob is a Muslim?" He says, "No, I didn't know this." You see. which goes to show you how much I was praying. You see, no, I was new converts. We pray more for a while. You know, we come into it, and then we. But on the prayer, let me say something that is actually, as a general rule, my understanding of the Haqq and of spirituality and religion is in Quran, God says that He is Rafiul Darajat. He's elevated at all of the levels, and it's a very subtle point that great teachers like Sheikh Ibn al-Arabi like to investigate. Those who with the eyes of duality, and most religious people, they can't help it, they come from a position of duality, they're often surprised by his treatment, let's say, of desire. So if you go to the chapter Aaron and Fusus, and you will see in one place, one of many places, the most wonderful doctrine if you really investigate it, which is that states of experience are qualitatively so different from each other that one must really inhabit the state to find the Lord there. So if we talk about this Muslim woman's, this woman's pain, huh? What's her name? I'm sorry. Yeah, so you see, this is, we must enter the state and agree to the gravity of that planet. You see, if we have recurring dreams, we're going to keep having recurring dreams until we inhabit the reality of that mind experience that wishes to finish some piece of a story. So in every state, Allah is there, and He remains elevated. He is elevated in all of the states and levels and all of the experiences, those of desire, those of being lost, those of being suffering. And when we realize this, it's a huge blessing, because in every state we are looking for Allah. Let's say in any society I'm in a rage, and I say, "Oh Allah, you know, this is. I feel muntaqim. I feel this name in me, manifesting in me. I feel mudil. I feel these names, Ya Allah. I feel them, and I say, but where's the mercy? You see." And I think yesterday we broke out in the group, and there's a verse I like a lot, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ نُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. See, whoever at that moment doesn't reflect and really feel the state, but then turn to the mercy, whoever turns away from the remembrance of the mercy, which means both remembering the mercy and actually seeing the mercies coming through, even in such a state, then God will appoint Satan for this person to be his or her companion. But what it means is the science of states. It means that prayer, coming back to prayer, which is really the point that I wanted to address, if instead of it being an obligation, for me, I think, I think about God, I have God in my heart, and now is the moment of embodiment. let the temple rise, let the mosque rise up and do ablution, and let the mosque bow in prayer. Embodiment. We have this short moment of embodiment, this moment of life. And let this moment of embodiment, what an opportunity that we won't have. I don't know if that says anything to you, but for me, when I realized how wonderful that let this piece of dirt turn into the embodiment. Let me enter the embodiment, the state of the embodiment. And it changes it for me. It's not an obligation, it's an opportunity. It's like, this is what I didn't have in the past. Religion, I mean. Not there was anything wrong with my religion. I was unable to benefit because I had been so conditioned by it. Just as I can easily be conditioned by Islam. But when I come to the prayer, I always think, let us purify the mosque, meaning this. Let us rise up in the embodiment and the rare opportunity that He has created me according to His form, meaning even my body, according to the form. And let me not forget this is the moment of embodiment. And go into sujood with complete surrender, into fana, you see. Something that when I saw as a child, like first in photographs, National Geographic, and later in movie, I thought, Inspire the Heart, I write, this is the only thing that reminded me of my mother was one of the great dancers of Polynesian dancing. And it was like watching a goddess dancing, and the only thing reminded me of that was sujood of the Islamic prayer. Because she was the embodiment of nature. She was this nature outside. She was the embodiment of that. And sujood was the embodiment, for me, of the nature of the heart, you see. So when I come to prayer, I come as carelessly to prayer probably as anybody, I imagine. I mean, if I'm at work and I can't pray, I'm thinking, I'm not going to force these people to, wait or something. I'm thinking I'll do the prayer later. The Afghans are so finicky. A lot of people in the East are very finicky. When I was made the successor, I met with a bunch of Afghans, and they were talking in a way that was too painfully religious for me, because I knew I would be a fake if I listened to this talk. And I said, recently there were some people in Sausalito, and they wanted me to speak. Not recently, it was after 9/11. They wanted me to speak about Islam, and they, in the middle of this, they served a pork roast. I'm telling the Afghans, they brought it and they put slices on the plate, and they put it in front of me. And I said to the Afghans, and I ate the pork roast. And they were shocked. They were so shocked that after they wouldn't let me lead the prayer for a while. But until the widow of my teacher said to them, none of you would ever have said what he said. You don't deserve to lead the prayer. Only he deserves to lead the prayer. As he said. And I said, and when I told my teacher this a day later. I said, Ustad, I'm really sorry to tell you, but they served the pork and I ate the pork. And he laughed and he said, why did you do this? And I said, because it occurred to me that at that moment there was such harmony and understanding, and I was conveying the message. I was not wishing to eat the pork, but I ate the pork. A voice in me said, eat the pork. So I ate the pork, and he said, did you do tawbah? And I said, yes, Ustad, I did tawbah. He says, very good, Abdul. He says, try to work harder. But he says, very good, you didn't do a bad thing. Inshallah, God is most merciful. Only sin God will not forgive is shirk. He says, so the reason Ustad liked me was because I had this attitude, see? And I like Imam Feisal's answer is, I don't have the qualifications or the study, but my sense is that when I say the prayer, I really know that I can do it in a way, not that it won't disturb me, that's a different matter, but won't disturb the harmony of the situation. Those students of mine who have said, well, I pray when I feel like it, my answer to that is, look, the prayer is more magnificent than this, because the prayer shows me my level of presence or absence to the truth. And it's like a Zen meditation. It's like, am I able to be present even though I don't want to, huh? So, but what helps me always is to think this will be rotting and dead, or burning or something, God knows, probably burning for all I know. But you see, this will be gone. But at this moment, it is here, let it be the embodiment of Islam. See?
Just two very brief comments. The Prophet said in the hadith regarding fasting, "Namu as-sa'im ibadah." The sleep of the fasting person is worship. And I recommend taking a nap also, as Abdul Hayy said, it is the sweetest sleep you will ever have in your life, is sleep when you're fasting, especially between Asr and Maghrib. It's so sweet. The other hadith also I wanted to share with you is when you were talking about prayer. The Prophet said in another hadith, 3 things dearest to me in life are prayer, perfume, and women. And I love perfume, I love women, the joy of intimacy with a woman. And I could never, to really enjoy prayer as much as you love holding a woman in your arms, that was for me pretty dramatic, you know. And yet we're told that, you know, Muhammad is our sunnah. We try to follow the sunnah of Muhammad. He represents the perfected human being. So how can I begin to enjoy prayer as much as I enjoy sex? You know, I mean, that to me is like quite a demand upon our. But keeping that in mind, I think, gives us something to shoot for, to aim for. I mean, to enjoy prayer that much. I mean, I think was it you in your presentation that said that you were having, like, you know, lovemaking with God. Okay, in a certain sense, prayer is like lovemaking with God, and to even have that. There's a brother here, I forget who said he had twice in his life he had this kind of taste of prayer, that he felt absolutely in the zone in prayer, and even if you have that once, it gives you a benchmark. So I think try to do that. There's another, you know, there's also a saying. It is said to be a hadith, but I've not been able to locate its source. So maybe one of these Sufi hadiths, you know. But it is at least a saying that's saying that the salah is the mi'raj of the mu'min. You know, the mi'raj is the ascension of the Prophet. And I have suggested to some of my murids to do this exercise. Read the hadith on the mi'raj of the Prophet. And imagine that you're doing 2 rak'ats. And in each rak'ah you are ascending with the Prophet through each level of the mi'raj. Try to do that once. I mean, the first time I did it, I couldn't finish the prayer. It was so rich and so intense. But this act of creative imagination, to use the language of Al-Arabi, can be very helpful in giving you at least an attempt to break this parrot-like movement that we are trained to do in Salah, when, you know, those of us born in Muslim countries, and try to experience the prayer from the point of view of the haqiqah, from the point of view of, you know, ascending with the Prophet while you're doing the prayer. I guarantee if you do this once, you may have difficulty finishing the 2 rak'ats, but on the positive side, I think it'll give you a new benchmark to how to enrich the experience of the prayer, because that's really what's the most important.
In one moment, Shamsi Tabriz was talking about prayer and speaking about the practice of the Prophet, peace and blessings upon him, and that his main practice was really immersion in divine contemplation. And that these prayers, or these things that are given to us as practice, were given because God realized, and through Muhammad that realization came, that this capacity for divine contemplation isn't readily given to everyone right away. So to be invited into that capacity, we're given these invitations, you know, to come, to pause throughout our day, to open to this possibility of developing that capacity to be more in love with the lover who's loving us. And it's interesting that the pattern of the prayers it begins early in the morning, and then there's a long space until the midday prayer often, and then, through the day it gets quicker and quicker. And it's as though, it's such a gift that way, because as we move through our day, our nafs gets involved with all kinds of things, and we get absorbed in whatever it is we're doing. So to have that patterning, come more quickly as we're getting more absorbed or getting more tired, as our energy may be waning, to be invited back in is such a beauty. And then to carry that, to recognize that invitation is everywhere. It's not just in that moment of bowing and prostration, but that with every breath there is that possibility of prostration. And Kabir and I laugh sometimes because sometimes he'll say something and I'll hear just the complete opposite of what he was meaning in his words. It just comes out somehow completely differently. And it was funny when he just was saying, something about moving the microphone that is corded. I heard the microphone that is courted. And just that reminder again of how we're all being courted, but that courted, and we're also courted. There's this sense of remembering to plug yourself in. That sense. Rumi has this beautiful passage about the drop that's being wooed by the ocean, and just holding that, just remembering that now and then, that these practices that we're given are really about that, about being invited by that ocean.
Thank you so much for this beautiful weekend. I know all of us will go back, and there's a lot of work we have to do and think and reflect and pull from all your experiences and beauty and sharing. Talking about prayers, I cannot thank God enough. All of us, some of us, many of us are taught how to pray at a young age, and I'm sure you were too. But I was 9 when I was taught how to pray, and I grew up in a place which had nature like this around me, so it was very healing. I was very close to nature. That's where I spent all my time. But when I was taught at age 9 how to pray, and I don't know, I just found this peace in there. That's all I was taught. There was a Maulvi who'd come and teach me how to read the Arabic, the Quran, and to pray. And that was my entire religious training for 45 minutes a day, and then I was free to scot around outside. But it just brought so much, I don't know, it was so personal. 5 times a day I would just move away, do what I had to do, and come out not understanding a word of what the Arabic meant, but it was time for myself. And I must say that, I was hospitalized from the age of 3 to 5. I was completely paralyzed. My father died at age 6. At 9, I was separated from my entire family, my siblings, my mother, for 3 years because of war. But I don't remember an unhappy moment in my life. I was always so very grateful. I was always alive, whatever came to life, whatever I had to attend. And it's because of this gift. Prayer, post 12, I went to schools where everything happened, everything that happens in the West today. But not knowing anything beyond just my prayers, really, and not even confident of reading the Quran in Arabic because, I didn't read the interpretation. I was kept away from everything that could have misguided me without any parenting, without living with people I'd never known. And really, it's, as Imam Feisal said, keeping the eye on the prize. Later on, I realize now, That I realized when I I had to have painkillers for almost about 6,000 milligrams a day, and I survived on that. And then one day a doctor said that, a friend, my father's friend, said that, you'll be bedridden because you'll keep on taking more. This is what we give cancer patients, and you have to do something about it. And I said, I'm not going to be bedridden. And from a point where I thought I'd never, ever get up, because if I don't take this medicine, I can't function, I kept on with my life. But I started to detox, I started looking into alternative therapy, and the fact that I'm as normal, I don't hurt, I don't take painkillers. It's because I didn't want to be bedridden. So if you truly believe that this prayer is going to help you, get you somewhere in life, otherwise I will be bedridden or crippled or unable, you will do it. And that's my only piece of advice. But I just wanted to relate a little story, and it's about a lot of us talking about giving, surrendering and unstacking. And it's a sweet little story about this man in India. This is maybe hundreds of years ago, and he was a professor, and he was the most well-known professor. I'm sure a lot of you know of the story, but and so he had a lot of students who sort of he was the god. One day he heard these murmurings about another professor, and he was a little upset, and then the whisperings became murmurings, and murmurings became there was a lot of, his name was constantly being mentioned. He was very upset, and he said, this is really ridiculous. I am the professor, and how can my students talk about somebody else, and I need to know who he is. So he figures out, and he's told it's a Chinese monk, and so he decides to go to China from India and treks all the way, and so whatever happens in the journey, gets there and gets to this mountaintop, and goes to this little house, knocks at the door, and the servant comes out, and he says, I'm so-and-so, and my name is so-and-so, and I've come to meet the monk. And he says, well, do come in, and sits down, and a day goes by, another day goes by, 3 days go by, the monk is busy, and he's very, very upset. He's raving and ranting and just can't contain himself. Anyway, 3 days later, he says, well, he's free now, you can come and see him. So he enters, and then the monk says, good morning, please do sit down, and says, would you like some tea? He doesn't want tea, Chinese tea ceremony, too long. And so anyway, he says, all right, I don't have a choice, starts pouring tea, the monk starts pouring tea, the teacup, and it's flowing now, it's sort of pouring out, and he says, what are you doing? I just want to know who you are, what are you about? And he keeps on pouring the tea, and he says, I can't tell you anything, I can't say anything to you. And he gets agitated, and he says, why? He says, well, you see, the cup is full, and unless I empty the cup, I can't pour more. So unless you empty yourself, you've got so much of yourself in you that if you can't empty yourself, I can't pour more in. I can't say anything to you. So there is so much that we have to work on, and for me, that's my biggest challenge. I really have so much work to do, but we have to remember to submit and give in, and I think I've taken up a lot of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bismillah. Who